Is Mario Party DS actually good, or is it just nostalgia talking? To understand why Mario Party DS is worth taking seriously, you have to put yourself back in 2007. Mario Party was just not a handheld series. The whole thing typically ran on a TV screen with everyone watching the same dice roll, the same star be bought, the same Bowser event from the same couch. That unified experience is what gave Mario Party its reputation as a friendship ender, and to this day that's how most people still think of this series. When Mario Party Advance came out on the GBA, it essentially changed everything and leaned into single player content instead. It wasn't a bad game, and I actually enjoyed this as a kid, but it was very limited compared to everything else in the series before it. By 2007, a real question hung over the DS announcement: can this work on the go? Or are we just doing another Advance situation where the game technically exists, but nobody's really pretending it's the full thing? The DS changed that through a few features, one of them being download play. All you needed was one cartridge and you could have up to 4 systems and have a full match. You didn't need 4 copies of the game, you needed one person who owned it and 3 friends with a DS, which in 2007 meant basically every kid within a 10-mile radius of any middle school. The detail sounds mundane now, but at the time it was the entire reason that this game had a social life. One of the reasons this game means so much to me is because I was able to play with friends who didn't have it. Sure, it wasn't perfect, load times were longer than if everyone had their own cartridge, and the host did have a slight edge in certain touch-heavy minigames, but those trade-offs were nothing compared to what you could actually do here. There's also something worth acknowledging about where this game sits in the series' history. Mario Party DS was the last Mario Party made by Hudson Soft, the studio that invented the franchise. They got absorbed into Konami in 2012 and effectively ceased to exist as an independent entity. ND Cube took over development after this, and if you've played Mario Party 9 and 10, you can feel the difference. Whether you like that direction or not, one thing was clear: the old Mario Party ended with Mario Party DS. And unlike Advance, this felt like a real Mario Party game. It even had its own theme here. All the Mario characters were miniature. Every board takes place in an oversized everyday environment, a garden that becomes a maze, a music room that becomes a puzzle, a stone statue. The miniature perspective is a cool aesthetic choice, but it's also used very creatively as well. Pacing also reflects this too. Matches work best at 10 to 15 turns instead of 20 or more that you might run on a console. The economy is also more volatile because the game needs big swings to happen inside that shorter window, and this is overall a very fast-paced game. There was a lot of instability here, but it made sense for what it was. Before I talk about the boards, I just want to say I do videos like this for a lot of other games. I have one on Mario Party 8, and I have a lot more coming up, so be sure to subscribe if that's something you're interested in. Mario Party lives and dies by its boards. Everything else, the minigames, the items, the modes, it's secondary compared to this. DS has 5 of them, which is fewer than the standard 6 you'd get on a console, and they are visibly smaller, there's no getting around that. But that doesn't mean they're empty. Wiggler's Garden is the opening board, and it works like a tutorial. Tulip bulbs hide varying coin rewards, Venus flytraps tax you as you pass, bouncing flowers send you back to the start when you land on them, which seems cruel on first contact and then becomes something you just accept. Kind of like how you accept that we're never getting Super Paper Mario back, sadly. None of these mechanics are entirely original, they're reassembled from somewhere else in the series, but they're arranged in a way that introduces the game's specific brand of volatility before you've had time to develop expectations. The loop structure creates natural traffic jams because everyone is moving through the same compact space. The flytrap tax slowly drains coins from everyone in small, consistent increments, keeping the economy tighter than it initially looks. As an entry board, it does exactly what it needs to. It teaches you the fundamentals of the game and doesn't feel overbearing. The weakness is obvious though. The layout is loop-based with limited path decision making, mostly reacting to events rather than plotting routes. It's fine for an opening board, but that kind of philosophy does run through the entire game, and whether that trade-off lands depends on the board. DK's stone statues where things get more ambitious and more willing to break itself. The board is linear, culminating at a static star space at the top. The idea is that reaching the summit is the goal, but maximizing your coin flow on the way up is the actual competition. You can buy as many stars as you can afford in a single visit, which immediately shifts the focus from racing to the star to managing your coins the entire climb. There's barrel events and rope mechanics that move you up and down the statue while draining coins aggressively. You're constantly weighing saving enough for a meaningful star purchase against having enough to survive the next junction. And then in the final turns, Bowser occasionally drops the star price to 5 coins, which sounds like a nice event right up until someone timed it perfectly and buys 4 stars in a single visit. That would be the best feeling though for anyone who's played this. Bowser's Pinball Machine is the most aesthetically committed board and structurally the least coherent, which is a frustrating combination. Visually, it's immediately appealing. It's a Mario board laid out like a pinball table, bottom to top with bumpers, flippers, and a Bowser Zone that can erase everything you've built. The Bowser Zone is the board's best idea. You risk losing all your coins and stars for a potential enormous payoff, and the Zero Flame that can strip you of everything is brutal enough that landing there unprepared really does sting. However, this board is far from perfect. The layout is cramped enough that the board feels more like a ride than a space you're navigating. and the structure doesn't really support what the aesthetic is promising. So overall, while this had a lot of potential, it's not one of my favorite boards. Kamek's library has a concept that should work better than it does. 3 jars hidden around the board each contain something different, a star, a coin, or setback, and the whole thing is built around racing to figure out which jar holds the star and getting there first. It's a compelling twist on traditional star hunting, but in practice, the structure means that if you're on the wrong half of the board when the star jar appears, you're just arriving late and hoping nobody beats you there. It's minimum 2 or 3 turns to cross over, and by that point, someone already in position will grab the star. That gets compounded by the star pipe item, which I'll get to shortly, but the short version is that it teleports you directly to the correct jar, bypassing the racing premise entirely. What should be tense competition just feels a little cheap here. The happening spaces are creative and the library aesthetic is charming, and there are good ideas buried here, but the foundation mechanic gets undermined by the board's own layout and then finished off by its item economy. I really like the look of this board as a kid, but replaying it now, I can see that there are a lot of pretty big issues with it, even if it does look cool. And the final one I haven't mentioned is Toadette's Music Room, and the reason I saved it for last is because it's the best board in the game, and I don't think it's particularly close either. The star price cycles dynamically, with each purchase increasing the cost, moving from 5, 10, 15, 20, depending on which musical note is active. And those notes are literal characters on the board, not fixed vendors. They move, they get repositioned by events, metronomes shift the star location, instruments alter where players end up. Every mechanic here reinforces the theme rather than just being used as a decoration. The result is a board that feels alive in ways the others reach and don't quite hit. There's more strategy here for saving your coins, and it's going to play out differently every match because the note positions and the movement events keeps reshuffling the situation. And like with the other boards, I really love the theme here. As someone into music, there's just a lot here I found visually interesting. There's a reason that this was the board that me and my friends would default to. Looking at all 5 together, there's a clear pattern. They all are fairly dense because the boards themselves are pretty small. Some play out better than others. All of them do try out interesting ideas, but they are kind of a mixed bag. The item and space systems are where Mario Party DS becomes unstable, and I want to be honest about that before explaining why I'm still defending the game. The space types are pretty much the same here as previous entries. Blue and red spaces do what they always do. Item spaces give you something to work with. Battle spaces put everyone's coins at stake. Friendship spaces give 5 coins to both you and a chosen opponent, which sounds useless, like it's only 5 coins, but it can be used to create an alliance and also make enemies with people who you didn't give coins to. But then in the last 5 turns, every friendship space converts to a duel space, which really changes things up at the end. Bowser spaces are punishing again, which is the right call. He can redistribute coins evenly like he's a socialist. He could force you to give coins to opponents. He could steal outright or take a star. The star theft here is brutal, though it lands softer here than in some entries because of how many other ways you get stars here. Hidden blocks are back too, and they're dangerous in both directions. You can stumble into a bunch of coins or even extra stars, but you could also hit a Zetar? I don't know how to pronounce that, but it removes a star you've already earned. Every seemingly empty space can carry that anxiety, and it puts you on edge when you should feel safe. The final 5 frenzy is aggressive rubber banding, kind of like in Mario Kart. The player in last place frequently receives significant boosts, like free coins, coins taken from opponents, sometimes a free star. If you've played well for 12 turns and someone gets handed a comeback star in turn 13, it's very frustrating. But inside of a 10 to 15 turn game, someone falling behind in turn 5 needs a realistic path back, or the last half of the match becomes meaningless. The frenzy guarantees that the final stretch stays tense regardless of how dominant any player has been. Whether that's the right trade-off or not is debatable, but structurally, given the format, it does make sense even when it feels bad. Now for items, Mario Party DS blends traditional consumables with hexes, merging older systems with the trap-based orb mechanics from previous games. The traditional side is mostly familiar: double and triple dice for movement control, warp dice for position gambling, snag bags for stealing items, grab bags for forcing trades. Standard tools, mostly well balanced, none are really that broken. The hexes are more interesting here. Unlike orbs from previous games, hexes disappear after activation as one-use traps. Coin steal takes coins from whoever lands on it, coin swap forces a trade, space swap switches positions, star steal does exactly what it says. Coin blocks and star blocks are risk. The star block can award up to 3 stars, which is either great or disaster depending on who lands on it. But here's the DS specific part of this. Since everyone has their own screen, a star block looks identical to a regular hex from the outside until you're standing on it. You know what you place, but they don't. That only works because of separate screens, and when it pays off, it really shows why this game works on the DS. The boards feel dense with traps almost immediately, which again can have everyone feel on edge between turns. What the hexes can't fully counterbalance is the shopping rule. You can buy multiple items per shop visit and replace inventory slots freely. If you have coins, you have essentially unlimited access to the best items. The hexes are clever, but the shopping rule undoes that a little bit. And that brings us to the star pipe. I mentioned this earlier, but it teleports you directly to the star. It works like the genie lamp from earlier entries, except in DS, it's cheap and accessible enough that it takes over. On boards this small, the gaps between players and the star are shorter by design. The star pipes close those gaps completely, and instead of navigating routes or really having any type of strategy, you just buy a pipe and appear there. Like I mentioned earlier, it makes Kamek's library jar race irrelevant. It reduces DK's statue to coin accumulation animation with a teleport at the end, and because you could buy multiple items per shop visit, a player with coins can stock pipes and lock in a star, and can just do this for several times in a row. As a kid, I thought the star pipe was an incredible item because it was extremely powerful, but I didn't really have an understanding that powerful and well-designed aren't always the same thing. The boards are already built around faster swings and shorter decision windows. The star pipe makes certain matches just feel really unbalanced. The chaos isn't accidental because these are deliberate choices built around shorter sessions and smaller boards. The game wants you to think about the now rather than having more long-term strategy that comes with longer turn play sessions. Mario Party DS has a story mode, a real one with actual structure, and not a single player option that simply just exists for no reason. For a game built around download play and 10 to 15 turn sessions, this matters more than it sounds. Getting 4 DS systems in the same room simultaneously just wasn't always possible. Sometimes you were just simply alone. A Mario Party that only worked as a multiplayer experience would have faded fast, but story mode gave a lot of single player content. The premise is this: Bowser shrinks everyone down, chaos ensues, you move through boards, the tiny perspective concept that runs through every board also runs through the campaign, giving it a continuity that Mario Party Advance struggled with. Instead of playing disconnected matches, you're progressing through something board by board, and the oversized environments that could have been purely cosmetic ended up framing the whole thing as a coherent story. You finish a board, the next one unlocks, and there's always something ahead. There's even some frames here that are kinda like cutscenes, but they exist just to give this a little more story. It's also worth acknowledging where this falls short too. The CPU difficulty settings meaningfully affect the solo experience, and the game doesn't do much to guide you towards finding the right balance. Too easy and the boards feel like formalities, and if it's too hard, then it starts feeling like it's rigged against you. Most people will figure out eventually, but there's some friction here that probably could have been avoided. The boss minigames are what makes story mode worth talking about rather than just acknowledging. They're designed around the specific encounter and actually have context behind them. These boss fights were one of my favorite part of the story modes, and we really don't see this much in other Mario parties. Revisiting story mode now, it's not that deep, it doesn't take that long, but it is still pretty engaging if I'm being honest. If there's one thing I think Mario Party DS is criminally underrated in, it's the minigames. You could criticize the board sizes, you could argue about the star pipe, you could write the coin economy off as a disaster, but if the minigames are good, the game has a foundation. And what surprised me most about coming back wasn't that I still liked the ones I remembered, it was how many of them are built around what the DS actually is, using the hardware in ways that create experiences that can't exist anywhere else. There are 73 of them in total, which for a handheld entry is a ton, and there's also an incredible amount of great minigames here. One thing that also has to be noted is that each player has their own screens, and this does fundamentally change some of the minigames. Camera shot is the clearest example. Each player moves through trying to photograph opponents without getting caught in their viewfinder. The whole concept runs on the fact that you can't see what they see. You don't know if someone's creeping up behind you, you don't know if you're already in someone's shot, and if this was on a TV, it would be so easy to screen peek. Other minigames use the separate screens more subtly. Soccer Survival avoids the balls with the last one standing, and lets players focus on their own space. But on the touchscreen side, Soap Surfers is a knockoff game that's faster and more satisfying than it has any right to be. The momentum makes collisions feel impactful, and it never feels unfair when you lose. Dust Buddies is a survival runner against an advancing vacuum, and is one of my personal favorites here. Cyber Scamper, which probably is my favorite minigame here, is similar. It's a platforming race with auto-scrolling and responsive movement, and you knew you were in for a good time when you saw this get selected. Another one of my favorites is Domino Effect. It's just simple, pure reaction speed. Study Fall is one of the simplest minigames because all it has you do is press one button, but it also has a ton of replay value because you want to try to get as close to the bottom before deploying your parachute as possible. Then there's some more gimmick-heavy minigames, and this is where some things fall apart. The microphone minigames are some of the worst parts of this game. Big Blowout and Toppling Tower require blowing into the mic repeatedly, which is one of the most embarrassing things you could do if you're playing this in public. The DS mic was not built to turn breathing into competitive design. This is basically the opposite of that playground game where people would try to hold their breath as long as possible. Short Fuse is probably the most defensible of the mic minigames, because it at least adds timing and risk rather than just asking you to blow into DS as hard as possible. Now these have not aged gracefully, but they were just a small part of it. Touchscreen tracing minigames are a mixed bag here. Double Vision is clever on paper, splitting a drawing between players and forcing coordination to complete it, but the tracing sensitivity is inconsistent enough to undercut the design. Sometimes a clean line doesn't register, sometimes a messy one does. It just feels very unpredictable, it just makes it feel broken. Trace Cadets is worse. It punishes slightly imperfect tracing while forgiving messy interior lines. It just feels unfair and kind of annoying. The 1v3 minigames are also inconsistent. Some heavily favor the solo player, others are nearly unwinnable for them. Peekaboo often gives the solo role too much control. Fast Food Frenzy is fun, but it is very tilted. Rubber Duck Rodeo and Flash and Dash swing in one direction or the other depending on factors that aren't always apparent. The problem isn't that 1v3 minigames exist because they've always existed, it's that they don't feel the most balanced here. While I have brought up some issues, the lineup is still really impressive and has a high ceiling. Besides some of my favorites that I mentioned, Hangar Management requires coordination and feels really fun to play. play. Crazy Crosshairs does the same thing for communication-based play. Shortcut Circuit is fun, and there's a handful of others, so let me know in the comments your favorite. Because matches run faster with a higher minigame per turn ratio than console entries, the strong ones stay in rotation constantly, there's almost no downtime, and the highs matter more than the lows here because they're more common. I don't think this has the best minigames in the series, but I think it's extremely underrated, and I'd love to see some of these come back. Because I love the minigames so much, one of my favorite things to do in this game was play the minigame modes. Since you didn't always have time to play a full board, there were a few different modes here. Step It Up is the traditional first win X amount mode. You pick a win count, 3, 5, or 7 and race to reach it. Nothing crazy, but it's fun and simple and sometimes exactly what you need. Score Scuffle leans into performance scoring across multiple minigames and rewards consistency rather than individual wins. In a game where the main boards are volatile to the point of feeling arbitrary, having a mode built on pure skill and point accumulation is a lot more satisfying. Battle Cup is another one worth highlighting. You play a fixed set of 5 minigames and whoever wins the most takes the cup, and you can select which minigames appear. If you know you're strong at certain games, you could stack the lineup. If you're playing with friends who know your tendencies, they may try to stack it against you. So there is strategy here if you know who you're playing against. Rocket Rascals is probably the most creative mode in the package. Before each minigame, a bridge piece gets selected. Whoever wins places that piece on their path forward towards a rocket. So here you aren't just competing for wins, but you're trying to build towards the goal. And the pieces also don't always match where you need to go, so sometimes you need to win purely to stop someone else from getting what they need. Special cross pieces appear periodically that let you replace sections of your path entirely. Bowser Jr. interferes and adds chaos. This was one of my personal favorites to play even by myself. And there's even more here. Boss Bash lets you replay all the story mode boss minigames competitively. Duel mode exists for 2-player play, which is the right call. Getting 4 DS systems together wasn't always realistic, but getting 2 was a lot more likely. Standard boards work fine 1v1, the smaller player count sharpens everything. Pen Pals is co-op, which is already unusual for the series. You and a partner work together to trap CPU opponents by circling them in. It's very experimental and wasn't my favorite mode, but it is charming and it is worth crediting as an attempt to do something different. Desert Duel is competitive and territory based. You move across a grid claiming spaces and digging up dice blocks and stars. Collisions trigger a duel where the winner can steal both stars and territory. As a focus head-to-head mode, it's a lot more deliberate than full board play. It gives you a much different experience if you're not looking to play a standard board. And finally, there's Puzzle mode, which includes Mario's Puzzle Party, Bomb Breakers, Peace Out, Block Star, Stick and Spin, and Triangle Twisters as a story mode unlock. For some reason, Mario games always seem to have puzzle mini games at this time. I mean, just look at New Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario 64 DS. What all this adds up to is a game that is not just a stripped-down Mario Party game. They clearly thought about how people actually use handhelds and gave a lot of different options for how to play. The soundtrack gets overlooked in most Mario Party conversations, and it's understandable because you're usually focused on the gameplay itself, but revisiting Mario Party DS made me pay more attention to it than I ever had before, and it just brought me back to simpler times. The whole game has a very distinct musical style that I can't really explain, but if you've seen those reels or shorts of Mario Party DS nostalgia, you know exactly what I mean. There's just something about DS era audio specifically that I always love. It doesn't sound crisp like home consoles would, but rather than trying to match console level orchestration, it just has a very distinct style that I love in other games too. Some of my favorites are Wiggler's Garden, Toadette's Music Room, and maybe my personal favorite, Into the Fairy Tale. It's hard to appreciate the soundtrack if you didn't grow up with it because you just won't have the same nostalgia attached to it. So is Mario Party DS actually that good? Let's look at some of the criticisms first. The boards are small and some of them can't structurally support the mechanics that they're assigned. Kamek's library gets dismantled by the items. Bowser's Pinball Machine has stronger aesthetics than gameplay, and the Star Pipe is too overpowered here. The 1v3 minigames are inconsistently balanced. The microphone minigames, well, not that many of them, definitely do bring the game down a little bit. The Final 5 frenzy can also be a little too generous to last place. But with all of that, Mario Party DS still did a lot for a handheld Mario Party. There's a lot of cool ideas here that have either barely been used since or just not used since. Using the different screens creatively was an awesome idea. Download play is something that has come back in other games, but it did originate here. And then the story mode, like I mentioned, was a pretty solid mode. The side content is deep enough that portable spinoff is the wrong category entirely. There's just so much here that you could play this game for a long time and still not get bored. So is this the most balanced entry in the series? No. Is it the most strategically deep? Also no. But is it creative, ambitious, and doing things no other game in the franchise tried on hardware that made half those things possible, and the other half a genuine uphill battle? Yes. There weren't high expectations for this game after Mario Party Advance just seemed like a completely stripped down Mario Party, and it is easy to call Mario Party DS as just a small side game and say it doesn't compete with the console games, but it wasn't trying to be like the console Mario Parties in a lot of ways. It set out to be one on the go that you could just play with friends whenever. This is still one of my favorite Mario Parties, and is it objectively one of the best? No. Is it nostalgia talking? Probably. But I do legitimately think that this has a great selection of minigames, it has a lot of creativity, and it has some of the best side modes we've ever seen in the series. So is Is Mario Party DS that good? I would say yes, with caveats. If you go into this game expecting a super polished experience, you're probably not going to get that here. But if you go into this game just looking for a fun Mario Party to play on the go, that's what you'll get here. And if you grew up with this game, going back to it is still as fun as ever. Maybe I'm being too nice to this game, but it is one of my personal favorites, and I'll always have a soft spot for it. But I want to know in the comments, what's your experience with Mario Party DS? Do you think it's that good? And what are your other favorite Mario Parties? If you haven't seen my video asking if Mario Party 8 is that good, be sure to check that out, and I have a ton of other content you'll probably enjoy. So be sure to subscribe if you want to see all that, and also consider joining my Discord. Thank you for watching.